Welcome to Darkverse, where curses outlive their creators and shadows hold memories darker than the grave. I'm Isaac Nightshade, your sentinel in the silence between heartbeats. Tonight we descend into The Conjuring Bloodline of Shadows, a tale where the veil between the living and the dead is sown with sorrow and torn by vengeance. Long ago, in a valley cradled by mist and moonlight, there stood an orphanage where laughter once danced like fireflies. Its walls were built of pine and patience, its halls warmed by the songs of children who had nowhere else to call home. At night, they gathered in the drafty dormitory, huddled under patchwork quilts, and sang a lullaby passed down from generations of lost souls. Sleep, little one, the stars are awake, the shadows will dance, but the dawn they'll forsake. The nun who cared for them, Sister Agnes, was young and bright-eyed, her heart as vast as the Appalachian sky. She'd arrived at Blackridge orphanage on a spring morning, her satchel filled with books of poetry and dried lavender. The children adored her, especially Thomas, a mute boy with ink-stained fingers who drew constellations on scraps of parchment. Agnes would sit with him at dusk, pointing to the emerging stars. "That one's Cassiopeia," she'd say, tracing the shape in the air. "She's a queen, Thomas, and you're her knight." But autumn brought more than falling leaves. Whispers slithered through the town of a cult that met in the woods, men in black robes, who spoke of purification. Agnes dismissed the rumors until the night she found a symbol carved into the orphanage door. A twisted cross, its edges jagged like broken bone. The children's laughter faded. Thomas's drawings grew dark, hooded figures, flames, and a nun weeping in the shadows. On the eve of the equinox, the cult came. Agnes woke to the smell of smoke and the screams of the cook, Martha, as hooded men dragged her into the night. "Run!" Martha shrieked. "Take the children and—" Her voice died with a thud. Agnes herded the children into the cellar, her hands steady despite the tremors in her chest. "Stay quiet," she whispered, pressing a finger to her lips. Thomas clung to her habit, his eyes wide. Above them, floorboards creaked under heavy boots. "Blood for purity," chanted a man's voice, cold and resonant. "The sins of the father shall be cleansed by the blood of the innocent." Agnes's breath hitched. She pushed the children deeper into the shadows, toward a hidden passage Thomas had scribbled in his drawings. "Go," she urged. "Follow the river stones. Don't look back." But as Thomas hesitated, a torch crashed through the cellar door. Fire bloomed, hungry and crimson. The cult leader, a towering figure with a scarred jaw, seized Agnes by the throat. "You dare defy the covenant?" the children screamed. Thomas froze, his small hand outstretched toward Agnes. "Run, Thomas," she begged. "For me." The boy fled, his footsteps echoing into the dark. Agnes's vision, blurred as smoke, filled the cellar. The cultist threw her to the flames. "Let her burn," he snarled. "A witch's pyre for a witch's sins." Agnes's final act was to clutch the silver locket at her throat, a gift from her mother, engraved with the words, "Light in darkness." As fire consumed her, she whispered a vow that twisted the air itself. Blood calls to blood, and the veil will fall. The orphanage collapsed, its timbers groaning like dying beasts. The cult scattered, their robes singed, their chants replaced by the wails of the damned. In the ashes, Thomas's charred sketchbook lay open to a drawing of Agnes, her arms outstretched, shielding the children. And beside it, the silver locket, unblemished by flame. Thomas wandered the woods for days, his feet bloodied, his throat raw from silent screams. He followed the river stones as Agnes had taught him until he found a cave veiled by ivy. There he drew his final sketch, the locket glowing in the river mud, its chain coiled like a serpent. Then he vanished, swallowed by the forest, his fate a mystery whispered by the pines. The locket waited. A traveler found it years later, a man with tired eyes and a hunger for gold. He slipped it into his pocket, but that night dreams of burning children plagued him. He tossed it into the river, where it sank into the silt, humming Agnes's lullaby to the catfish and crawdads. Decades passed. A flood carried it downstream, where a farmer's plow unearthed it, the silver gleaming under. The sun, he gave it to his wife, who wore it once before her reflection in the mirror began to weep. She buried it beneath the old oak tree, where the McLeod farmhouse would one day stand. Years passed. The cult's descendants forgot their sins, burying them beneath lies and Sunday sermons. But the locket waited, its chain coiled like a serpent in the earth. And in Blackridge, when the moon hung low and the wind carried the scent of burning pine, the children's lullaby still hummed through the valley. Sleep, little one, the stars are awake, the shadows will dance, but the dawn they'll forsake. One autumn night, a child would hear it again, a nun's voice soft as smoke, singing from the mirror, and the curse, patient as the turning earth, would stir. Blood calls to blood, and the veil would tremble. Chapter 1. The Letter. The letter arrived on a Thursday, its edges yellowed and frayed, as if it had traveled through decades rather than days. Miriam Hartley found it nestled between grocery bills and junk mail, the ink smudged but the words unmistakable. Help us. She sings to her. She sings the lullaby. The signature trembled. Samuel McLeod, Blackridge, Virginia. A name that stirred memories Miriam couldn't quite grasp, like a half-remembered dream. Her brother Elias scoffed when she showed him. He sat at their cluttered kitchen table, a map of Appalachia spread before him, coffee steaming in his chipped mug. Another ghost story, he said, his voice rough from too many sleepless nights. The Warrens warned us about Blackridge. Some doors, he mimicked Ed Warren's gravelly tone, should stay closed. Miriam traced the locket at her throat, her mother's locket, cold even in the morning sun. What if it's not a story, Elias? What if the nun is real, like Mother's shadow? The room stilled. Years ago, their mother had died clutching that locket, her body curled before a shattered mirror. The coroner called it a heart attack. Miriam called it a warning. Elias stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Pack your things. We leave at dawn. The road to Blackridge wound through mountains cloaked in mist, the trees leaning close as if sharing secrets. Miriam sketched in her notebook, a nun's veiled face, a child's hand pressed to glass, while Elias drove in silence, his knuckles white on the wheel. The locket hummed faintly, a sound felt more than heard. Do you remember, Miriam whispered, how Mother would sing to us during storms? Elias stiffened. Don't, but she continued. She'd sit by the window, humming that lullaby. The night she died. Enough, Elias snapped, the car swerving slightly. She was sick, Miriam, not haunted. Miriam stared at her reflection in the passenger window. For a moment, the glass rippled, a shadow flickering behind her, a nun's hand reaching. But when she blinked, it was gone. Blackridge was a town forgotten by time. Weathered clapboard houses sagged under ivy, and a church with a collapsed steeple stood sentinel over a cemetery of tiny, nameless graves. A rusted sign creaked in the wind. Repent! The McLeod farm waited at the end of a dirt road. Samuel McLeod stood on the porch, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow. Beside him, his wife Clara rocked in a wooden chair, cradling a porcelain doll with chipped paint and empty eyes. She's in the mirrors, Clara murmured, not looking up. The nun, she's in the mirrors. Inside, the farmhouse smelled of beeswax and damp earth. Lila McLeod, 8, years old with raven hair and a doll clutched to her chest, sat cross-legged on the floor. She hummed a tune, broken, familiar. Sleep, little one. The stars are awake. Miriam knelt beside her. Lila, can you tell me about the nun? The child looked up, her smile too wise for her face. Sister Asmodea says you'll burn too, just like her. Outside, the wind sighed. The music box on Lila's dresser began to play, a warped, off-key rendition of the lullaby. That night, Elias set up his equipment, a tape recorder, a camera, an EMF meter that flickered like a nervous heartbeat. Miriam lit a candle, its flame painting shadows on the walls. At 3:03 a.m., the music box stopped. Lila's eyes snapped open, black and unblinking. "She's here," she whispered. Frost spiderwebbed across the mirror. A shadow shifted in the glass. A nun, her habit tattered, her voice a chorus of whispers. "Blood calls to blood." Miriam's locket turned to ice. Elias's camera sparked and died. And Lila laughed. Chapter 2. The Orphanage of Whispers. Morning crept into Blackridge like a shy guest, its pale light washing over the orphanage ruins. Miriam stood at the edge of the crumbling foundation, her boots sinking into ash that felt too warm for autumn. Elias lingered behind, his camera slung over one shoulder, his jaw set in stubborn disbelief. "Stay close," he muttered. Floors rotted through. But Miriam was already stepping inside, drawn by a hum in the air, a sound like distant children singing. The orphanage was a skeleton. Sunlight pierced the collapsed roof, painting gold on charred beams and walls scarred by fire. Miriam's fingers brushed a soot-stained mural, faded butterflies, half-eaten by flames. "They painted this," she whispered. "The children." Elias kicked a rusted bed frame. "Nothing here but ghosts." But as he spoke, a cold breeze swept through the ruins, carrying the scent of lavender. Agnes's lavender, dried and tucked into letters she'd once written home. In the corner, half buried under debris, Miriam found it. A leather-bound journal, its edges curled like autumn leaves. The cover read Agnes in faded ink. Inside, sketches of children smiled up at her. Thomas with his constellation drawings, Mary clutching a rag doll, Jacob missing a front tooth. But as Miriam flipped further, the pages darkened. Hooded figures, flames, a nun weeping in the shadows, her hands pressed to a mirror. "They called her a witch," Miriam read aloud. "But she only wanted to save them." Elias crouched beside a collapsed beam, his flashlight revealing a hatch in the floor. "Cellar," he said, prying it open. The wood splintered with a groan, releasing a rush of cold, damp air. 13 coffins, he breathed. "Small ones." Miriam's stomach tightened. Each coffin bore a name. Thomas, Mary, Jacob. The last was empty, its lid cracked open like a hungry mouth. "They never left," Elias murmured, his voice unsteady. "They're still here, waiting." Above them, the wind whistled, through the ruins, and for a moment, just a moment, the orphans' laughter echoed. Miriam closed her eyes. Somewhere far away, the lullaby played. "Sleep, little one. The stars are awake." And the walls sighed, as if the orphanage remembered. Back at the farmhouse, Lila waited on the porch, her doll clutched to her chest. "You found her book," she said, not asking. "Sister Asmodee is sad. She doesn't like the dark." Miriam knelt. "Can you talk to her, Lila? Can you tell her we want to help?" The child's smile faded. "She says you have to break the locket before the bad men come back." Behind them, the farmhouse mirror cracked with a sound like a sob. That night, Miriam dreamt of her mother. They stood in their old home, the air thick with the smell of burnt wax. Her mother held the silver locket, tears streaming down her face. "I tried to warn you," she said, her voice echoing through time. "Blood calls to blood, Miriam. It always does." The mirror behind her shattered. A nun's hand reached through the glass. Miriam awoke screaming, the locket searing her skin like ice. Elias burst into the room, his face pale. "We're leaving, now!" But Miriam stared at the frost blooming on the window pane. "It's too late. She's already here." In the woods, the orphanage ruins groaned. The silver locket, buried for decades in river mud, now pulsed in the grip of a hooded figure. His chant merged with the wind. "Blood calls to blood, and the veil will fall." Somewhere, Thomas's ghost watched, his silent scream lost to the stars. Back at the farmhouse, Lila hummed the lullaby to her doll. The music box played on, its melody slower now, a countdown. Clara McLeod rocked in her chair, her eyes vacant. "The nuns in the mirrors," she murmured. "But the bad men are in the walls." Elias packed his gear, his hands steady but his breath shallow. Miriam sketched by candlelight. Agnes, Thomas, her mother, all bound by the same silver chain. Blood called to blood, and the veil began to tear. Chapter 3. The Locket's Curse. The storm arrived quietly, its first raindrops tapping the farmhouse roof like timid knocks. Samuel McLeod sat by the hearth, his calloused hands cradling a whiskey glass. Miriam and Elias faced him, the firelight casting long shadows that danced like restless spirits. Between them, the silver locket pulsed, a heartbeat frozen in metal. "It began with my grandfather," Samuel said, his voice roughened by guilt. "He found the locket in the river mud, its chain gleaming like a snake's skin. Thought it was a blessing. Didn't know it was a key." Miriam's fingers brushed the locket. It hummed, a vibration that echoed in her bones. "A key to what?" Samuel drained his glass. "To the veil. The cult believed it could bind souls, trade lives for power." Elias leaned forward, his skepticism fraying. "You're saying your family murdered kids for magic?" Samuel flinched. "Not magic, absolution." The fire spat embers as Samuel's story unfurled. Granddad thought the locket was a sign from God, a way to wash away the blood on his hands. But it wasn't God answering, it was them. Miriam's breath caught. The locket's hum sharpened, pulling her into a vision. Silas McLeod, 1872. The riverbank stank of wet iron. The locket glinted in his palm, its chains slithering like a living thing. "Atonement," he whispered, as hooded men cloaked in midnight emerged from the trees. Their leader pressed a blade to his wrist. "Blood for blood, Silas. The covenant demands it." A warm child's whimper echoed. Silas hesitated, then nodded. Miriam jerked back, gasping. "You saw it, didn't you?" Samuel muttered. "Granddad's sin." Elias stood abruptly. "Enough stories. Show us proof." Samuel led them to a loose floorboard in the kitchen. Beneath it lay Thomas's sketchbook, its pages screaming with ink. Hooded men circling a well, the locket glowing above the water. On the last page, a child's hand reaching from the depths. "They drowned him here," Samuel said, his body still down. "There. And the locket? It remembers." The locket surged in Miriam's grip, ice spreading up her arm. She collapsed, visions crashing over her. Agnes burning, her locket melting into her skin, fusing with her vow. Blood calls to blood. Miriam's mother, decades later, staring into a mirror, the locket in her hand, her reflection mouthing Agnes's words. Then, glass shattering, a shadow dragging her into the void. "Mother!" Miriam choked. "You knew!" Elias knelt beside her, his voice breaking. "What's happening to her?" Samuel stared into the storm. "The veil's thin tonight. The dead are loud." Thunder shook the house. Clara's rocking chair creaked faster, her doll humming the lullaby. "She's here," Clara giggled. "Sister Asmodea's dancing in the rain." Elias yanked open the door. Lightning fractured the sky, illuminating figures in the orchard, hooded, motionless. "They're back," Samuel whispered. "For the locket, for Lila." The child stood in the hallway, her nightgown glowing. "Thomas is lonely. He wants to play." Miriam gripped the locket. "How do we break it?" "Fire," Samuel said. "But it won't go easy." Elias shoved kindling into the hearth. "Then we burn it hard." As flames leapt, the locket thrashed in Miriam's hand. Shadows erupted, children's faces contorted in silent screams. Their small hands clawed at the air, pointing to the well. "Thomas waits," they whispered. "Free him, free us all." Samuel paled. "The well, that's where they kept the bodies." "Where, Granddad?" Elias grabbed a shovel. "Then we dig." Rain sheeted down as they trudged to the well. The orchard figures watched, chanting, "Blood calls to blood." Miriam peered into the black water. Something glinted below. A small skeleton, its fingers curled around a rusted key. "Thomas, I'm sorry," she whispered. "You're free now." The locket shrieked, its chains slicing her palm. Blood dripped into the well. The water boiled. Back inside, Elias thrust the locket into the fire. It writhed, Agnes's screams merging with the children's. "Break!" Miriam pleaded. "Break!" With a final wail, the locket shattered. The hearth flared blue, then died. Silence fell, heavy and fragile. Lila slept, her doll limp in her arms. Clara's rocking slowed. "Gone," she murmured. "The nun's gone." But Elias frowned. On the windowsill, a single silver chain link gleamed. "Miriam," she pocketed it, her eyes haunted. "Not gone, just waiting." Chapter 4. The Veil's Tears. The silence after the locket's destruction was fragile, like a soap bubble trembling in the air. For 3 days, the farmhouse slept. Lila's laughter returned, light and unburdened. Clara hummed hymns as she baked bread, her eyes clearer than they'd been in years. Even Samuel smiled, though it never reached his eyes. But Miriam knew better. At night, she watched the single silver chain link she'd salvaged, its surface fogging with breath it shouldn't have. Elias packed their gear, his movements brisk. "We leave tomorrow," he said. "The Warrens can handle the rest." Miriam didn't argue. She simply sketched the broken locket, the well, and a hooded figure she'd glimpsed in the orchard shadows. On the 4th night, the music box played again. Miriam followed the sound to Lila's room. The child slept peacefully, but the box's lid was open, its gears turning on their own. The tune was slower now, warped, a dirge. "Sleep, little one, the stars are awake." Miriam reached to close it, but the locket's chain link burned her palm. In the mirror, Sister Asmodea stood, not a specter, but a woman. Her veil lifted, revealing Agnes's face, gentle, scarred by fire, her eyes pools of sorrow. "They're coming," she whispered. "The veil is torn. You must mend it." The vision faded, leaving frost in the shape of a cross on the glass. Elias found Miriam at dawn, her fingers tracing the orphanage ruins. "We're leaving," he said. "Today." She held up the chain link. It glowed faintly, casting shadows that squirmed like eels. "It's not over. The cult's still out there. And Thomas is dead," Elias snapped. "And we've done enough." But as he turned, the ground trembled. From the woods came a sound, 100 voices chanting in unison. "Blood calls to blood, and the veil will fall." The cult emerged at dusk, hooded and faceless, their robes blending with the twilight. They circled the farmhouse, their chants harmonizing with the wind. Lila pressed, her doll to the window, its glass eyes reflecting the nightmare outside. "Sister Asmodea says to be brave," and she whispered, "but I'm scared." Samuel loaded his shotgun, hands steady. "Stay with Clara. Don't look." Miriam faced Elias, the chain link cold in her fist. "We need fire and salt and a miracle," Elias finished. But he followed her to the orphanage ruins, their footsteps crunching on dead leaves. The veil was thinnest here. The air buzzed, and the stars above seemed to pulse. Miriam scattered salt in a circle, her mother's locket warm against her chest. "Agnes," she called, "we need you." The wind stilled, then a ripple in the dark. Agnes materialized, her form flickering like candlelight. "The chain," she said. "Bind it to the relic." Elias frowned. "What relic?" But Miriam already knew. She knelt, digging through ash until her fingers brushed cold metal. The rusted key from Thomas's skeletal hand. The cult reached the ruins as the moon rose. Their leader stepped forward, his hood falling to reveal Silas McLeod's face, or a shadow of it, twisted by time. "The covenant demands blood," he intoned. "The child's blood." Miriam stood, the key and chain link fused in her grip. "No more blood," she said. "Only light." Agnes's voice joined hers, echoing through the ruins. "Blood calls to blood, but love mends the veil." Miriam plunged the fused relic into the salt circle. Light erupted, pure, blinding, as the orphan's laughter rang out, sweet and free. The cultists screamed, their robes igniting into ash. Silas's shadow dissolved, his final curse lost to the stars. When the light faded, the ruins were silent. The chain link and key were gone. Lila's music box lay shattered in the grass. Back at the farmhouse, Clara rocked her doll, singing a lullaby none could hear. Elias packed the car, his hands trembling. "It's done," he said. But Miriam touched her mother's locket. It hummed, softly now, but insistent. "Blood calls to blood," and the veil, still, quivered. Chapter 5. The Final Ritual. The farmhouse slept beneath a sky swollen with stars. Miriam sat at the kitchen table, the silver chain link cold against her palm. Elias snored on the couch, his face softened by exhaustion. Outside, the orchard stood silent, the cult's ashes scattered to the wind. But the veil still quivered, a moth's wing, thin and torn. Lila appeared in the doorway, her doll dangling from one hand. "Sister Asmodea says you have to finish it," she whispered. "Where it began." Miriam nodded. She already knew. They returned to the orphanage ruins at midnight, the air thick with the scent of burnt lavender. Elias carried a lantern, its light pooling on the rubble like liquid gold. "This is madness," he muttered. "We should have left hours ago." Miriam knelt in the ash. "It's not over. The veil is still broken. And the locket, it's still here." She pressed the chain link to the soil. It pulsed faintly, humming Agnes's lullaby. Elias sighed. "What do we do?" "We mend it," Miriam said, "with fire and light." Agnes appeared as they gathered kindling, a flicker of smoke and starlight. Her voice echoed, gentle as a mother's touch. "The chain binds the curse. The key opens the veil. Together, they can heal it." Miriam placed Thomas's rusted key beside the chain link. "How?" Agnes's hand brushed Miriam's cheek, cold yet comforting. "Sacrifice," she whispered. "A life for a life." Elias stiffened. "Number, we're not doing this." But Lila stepped forward, her small face grave. "Not her," she said, pointing to Miriam. "Him." The lantern light wavered. Elias's breath hitched. "Me?" Miriam's eyes burned. "Number, there's another way." Agnes shook her head. "The veil demands balance. A life given, not taken." Elias stared at the key, his reflection warped in its rust. "For Lila," he said finally. "For Mother." Miriam gripped his arm. "Elias, do it," he said, "before I change my mind." They built the fire in the orphanage cellar, where 13 coffins once lay. Elias sat at the edge of the flames, his face calm. "Tell the Warrens. Tell them I tried." Miriam's tears fell as she placed the chain link and key in his hands. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," he said. "Some doors should stay closed." The fire roared to life, blue and hungry. Elias's form shimmered, a shadow, then a memory. The chain link melted, the key dissolved, and the veil sighed, stitching itself whole. Dawn broke over Blackridge, pink and tender. Miriam stood alone in the ruins, Elias's lantern, extinguished at her feet. The air smelled of rain and pine. The curse's weight lifted. At the farmhouse, Lila waited on the porch, her doll's eyes clear and bright. "He's with the stars now," she said, "like Thomas." Samuel and Clara stood behind her, their hands clasped, a family mended if not whole. Miriam left at noon, Elias's map folded in her pocket. The locket's hum had quieted, but the chain link remained, warm now, a tiny ember against her skin. In the woods, the cult's leader watched her. Go, his hood fell back, revealing a face that mirrored Samuel's, a brother lost, a shadow unclaimed. He lifted a shard of the shattered locket, its surface gleaming with malice. "Blood calls to blood," he murmured. But the wind carried his words away, and the stars did not listen. Chapter 6. Whispers in the Dawn. Years drifted over Blackridge like autumn leaves, softly, quietly. Miriam settled in a cottage by the sea, its windows open to salt-kissed winds and the cry of gulls. Elias's lantern hung above the hearth, its glass frosted by time. She painted now, oceans and stars, faces she'd loved and lost. The silver chain link rested in a velvet box, its hum a distant memory. But some nights when the moon hung low, she'd hear it, a fragment of the lullaby carried on the tide. "Sleep, little one, the stars are awake." She'd stir, her brush pausing mid-stroke, and swear the shadows in the corner swayed like a nun's tattered habit. In Blackridge, Lila grew tall and bright, her laughter chasing the ghosts from the McLeod farm. Samuel planted lilies over the well, their petals white as bone. Clara wove tapestries of lavender fields and smiling children, Her hands steady, her mind clear. The orchard bloomed anew, its apples sweet and untainted. Yet in the woods, where the veil had frayed, a hooded figure knelt. He pressed a shard of the shattered locket to his lips, its edges sharp as sin. "Blood calls to blood," he rasped, but the words dissolved into the wind, unanswered. One gray morning, a package arrived at Miriam's door. No return address, only a symbol etched in wax, a twisted cross. Inside lay the locket shard, cold and gleaming, and a note in looping script. "For the Warrens. She will understand." Miriam drove to Connecticut, the shard wrapped him. In silk, the Warrens' house loomed, a Victorian sentinel, its walls breathing with secrets. Lorraine opened the door, her gaze lingering on the silk-wrapped bundle. "Ah," she said softly, "the Blackridge locket. We wondered where it had gone." In the artifact room, Ed Warren placed the shard beside Annabelle's glass case. "Some curses never die," he said. "They just wait." Lorraine touched Miriam's hand, her eyes seeing too much. "You've mended the veil, but shadows linger. Sleep lightly, dear." Miriam returned to the sea. That night she walked the shore, the stars reflecting in the waves like scattered diamonds. The chain link in its velvet box hummed once, a farewell or a warning, then fell silent. In Blackridge, Lila tucked her daughter into bed, humming the old lullaby. "Sleep, little one, the stars are awake." The child smiled, her fingers curled around a new doll, this one with eyes of sea glass, clear and unbroken. And in the Warrens' artifact room, the locket shard glinted under dim light. Lorraine paused as she passed it, a chill brushing her spine. "Not yet," she whispered, "but soon." The stars watched, the veil held, and the world for now dreamed on.